Hello, Instagram. This is my first time going live, not with the bike, in which I'm very used to, hello, Brooklyn, it's a bike, and now I'm a person. We are going live today for a Tandem Talk, which is the non-binarian's cute little, not quite an interview, more like a fireside chat. And today I'll be in conversation with one of the two owners of Loyalty Bookstore. Hello, tuning in today. We're going to let folks trickle in. Tuning in. Hi. Seeing folks coming on in. It's cute, cute. Hi. Thanks for spending your day with me. Your whole day. But Hannah Oliver Depp, one of the owners of Loyalty Bookstore in DC, they are a Black queer bookstore owner. You may know them. There we go. Hello, Hannah. I'm gonna let Hannah into the room, and then maybe Hannah can introduce themselves. Funny because people were like, "Did I do it right?" And now here I am being like, "Did I do it right? Am I doing it right?" This is me vamping.
Yay, it worked.
Hi.
Hi. Hello.
Hello.
Naturally, we have internet troubles the moment I decide to go live on Instagram.
That's
It's a classic.
that's the way.
Hmm.
Literally 4 years into virtual programming, it is still like we're all in that place of like, did I do it? Is it on?
Did I
Um,
work it? Did I do it properly? I don't know.
it's the culture. Um, so hey, what's up?
What's up, man?
Um, so thank you so much for joining me today. This is very fun for me. As you know, but for folks tuning in, Hannah and I know each other from Bookland, but like I first got to know Hannah from a distance as like peer inspo,
I want to
pseudo
think from a distance
mentor, role
now.
model, who then has become a pal and colleague. So yeah, super pumped to have you here.
Yay.
And if you want to do a little intro for folks tuning in with the non-binarian who might not be familiar with who we are.
Yes. By the way, you just made me want to sing from a distance, like, because
Please do.
that's how
Please do.
that's how almost all of my book friends tips start. Um, so I'm Hannah Oliver Depp. I'm the co-owner along with Christine Ballo of Loyalty Bookstores. We started up as a pop-up in the holiday season of 2018, and we have two locations, one in um, Washington, D.C. in the Petworth neighborhood, which opened up in 2019, and in the Silver Spring community, which is just over the line in Maryland, that opened in 2020. And our Silver Spring location is now inside of Bump and Grind Analog Markets, which is a record shop, coffee, roastery, and delicious coffee spot that also features a bunch of local makers and us, a bookstore. And we moved in there February of this year. What is time? I don't know. And our DC location is just us. So we have just had our 5th-year anniversary. And I opened the store, and then Christine came on last year as a co-owner from being our events manager. So it's been really, really dope. It's helped expand and influence the stock of the store. I am, we can play the identity list game. I'm Black,
You're like, which boxes do you want me to
multiracial.
check,
What
baby?
boxes do you want me to check? Very queer. I was adopted. Neurodivergent. Christine is Filipino and physically disabled, and also queer. And so it's just a gay old time over here at Loyalty Books. I think we have a straight employee. I've never asked him. Seems rude. But
The token straight. You gotta have
we gotta have one. He's also our token white guy, but he's actually not from the States. So, we're doing great. But it is, we sort of, on that note, everything about loyalty is centering us and decentering whiteness. So we kind of joke that if you're a specialty month table at a traditional bookstore, you're the central focus at Loyalty Books.
Nice.
I was a bookseller for 10 years before opening up Loyalty. So I've been in the industry a long time, been working on, every kind of diversity committee, etc. you can think of.
I love the
been through
quotes.
Done work with the amazing Black Bookseller Coalition, and just trying to remind people we're here, and we've been doing this for a very, very long time. And now that we're being recognized, it's lovely, but the work exists and will exist with or without institutional support. So it's a good time. I'm also now blessed to be the NABA, which is our Regional Trade Association president of our board, which is very cool because you get to do sort of the work, literally with like in trade law and stuff that deeply, deeply affects small businesses, as well as help with education and outreach in our immediate region, which is like the Mid-Atlantic region, roughly. And some going up through like upstate New York. So, which depending on who you ask in upstate New York is or is not.
It's
but
contentious.
I'll let the New Yorkers sort that out themselves. I have no dog in this fight. But yeah, so I'm really, really committed to working both outside and inside the system to increase representation in publishing in community neighborhoods, to have their own bookstores that look like the communities that they're in. And I think a lot of non-traditional models like yours would really help change that. As somebody started up as a pop-up, and I think that if you want to be a pop-up for the entirety of your store's existence, that is beautiful, that is wonderful. Rent is not the way forward.
Bro.
If you want to figure out how to buy a building, let's figure that out. I think
Let's all
there's so much.
Can do that together.
It's all right. I was just literally just going to say, I think there's so much from community organizing background, from a theater kid background. You do things scrappy, man. Like, you got to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of what I bring to bookselling is both like, I'm very good at like, okay, this is how it's supposed to be done, and then this is how we're actually going to get it done. And I like using both the systematic ways and the innovative ways of people who have been outside the system, who've been doing it forever and figuring things out.
I think that's very evident in your work, from having like known of you, but as a like public face of Loyalty, is like, okay, like this person knows what's up. Well, I mean, very much, and like Christine now too, as co-owner, that like the personal really reaches people. And with everything that y'all have been going through pretty much since the beginning, we don't have to like get too into this, but for folks who may not know, when I say what y'all have been going through, I encourage you to do a little homework on your own, though it's out there, and you can even just look at Loyalty's Instagram to learn a little bit, or Drag Story Hour, or a number of Rainbow Coalition being one of them, which you mentioned. But very early in Loyalty's history, subject to harm from protesters and that really loud minority, but who pose a real threat to children and to drag performers doing Drag Story Hour, and of course to the staff themselves.
Yep.
And so that's something that I know is very you, but I know is also not typical of the industry, to be like, no, I'm going to stand firm in like being there for my community. I know that's why you named your store what you named your store. And so like, I just hold you, I'm like getting verklempt already. Oh my God, we're like minute 5. But like, I just hold you in such high regard as a model. Like when you were saying like working in the system and outside the system, I think when people think of bookselling, which is often gatekept if you are new to it, and then like once you're in it, it can very much feel like there are these barriers and there's like this jargon and this book speak that you're like, what is this? What am I missing? So you kind of have to like dig your way in there. But a lot of like in the system, I feel like from my own experiences, corporate and indie and new and used, is like playing nice.
Yeah.
And because retail, at least in the States, has this history, even though it's bullshit, of like the customer's always right. It's like the customer's always right until they're wrong.
Right.
But when it comes to like standing by your ethos, and you were
Yeah.
saying you're mission driven, you don't have to be mission driven to have values
Right.
and ethics.
I think most people do. I think that a lot of what we've been seeing in the industry is people going like, "Oh, I do actually have a value set, but I've never had to articulate because I'm operating from a place of privilege. So I've never
Yeah.
had to articulate what my value set is before, and now I'm being asked to. I mean, you'd be shocked. Like when I was like leading management workshops, um, you know, outside of being mission driven, I would just be like, "What's your mission statement?" And like people didn't have one, and I was like, "Why did you do this?" It's so hard. Why
Why?
did you do this? Go do
I can't
anything
imagine
else.
that either. And maybe that's also just because of like the person I am in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like I view
Yeah.
everything through that lens
Yeah,
of like, why am I
absolutely.
here?
Right.
And it doesn't
It's
have to be this
definitely
big grand scheme, but like, why am I
as
here? What am I doing? What are we all
yeah.
doing?
It's definitely a mission-based situation, and you just sit there going like, why would you do something this hard? We're gonna go on a walk through the store so I can let the kiddos who are
I
hanging
was
out
just
and
about to ask if you were in the back office, if you were in the
go. Well,
store
my back office is actually just the back part here. I'll turn the
of
camera
the
around. Try not to get the
store.
kiddos' face. I don't want to get kiddo faces in here that aren't
Sure.
authorized. So we're in the children's room, and then I have a little back desk that we work at
Which
throughout the
which
time in there.
location are we in right now?
We are in the
Cute.
Petworth store. This is my OG baby.
Mm.
Um, so just a little
OGB.
accidental bookstore tour. I reorient myself, but yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it's kind of it's funny because again, speaking of being non-binary, personally
Speaking
and
of,
professionally, literally it's again when we talk about like, oh, are you a queer bookstore and a black bookstore, that's more than just like what you personally identify as. It has to do with how you work through all of your systems and all of your operations. And I was like, oh yeah, because I'm all of the things, I feel that I also think about systems in that way too, where a lot of what the industry has been doing to professionalize is actually forcing a lot of people to reckon with the fact that like the industry was on the defensive for so long, from Barnes and Noble, Borders, from then Amazon, now just like the shrinking of literature in America in general, as well as the rights of small businesses and any sort of opportunity to get into it is coming from a privileged position most of the time, just to be able to afford to do this.
yeah,
And then as those people are learning from people who've already been outside of the system, being like, oh, I need to define why I'm doing this. I need to think about
yeah,
why I'm doing this.
yeah.
This is not a play thing. And so a lot of the industry for the last generation or so has been working to professionalize. And sometimes that is increasing gatekeeping by accident. And sometimes it's actually welcoming a lot because they have a lot to learn from people who've been outside of the system. But I think another thing from people who are new to it, and we've seen a huge explosion of people starting book projects, bookstore projects since 2020.
Yeah.
And because we weren't able to gather in person, we were doing all this
Yep.
like online education and
Yep.
online community, which was super great and led to a lot of wonderful connections. It was like, oh, we're not able to get into a lot of the nuances of this. And bookselling has always been like learning via doing and observing somebody who's more experienced than you, because there
Yeah.
isn't a manual for it. And a lot of us have tried to write one, myself included. And it's just like, and then, but kind of, it's a vibe. But
Yeah.
also, there's a right way to do it, but also a vibe because you're going to do it slightly differently. There's, really practical things. There's not a centralized point of sale or ordering system for this industry. I've worked retail across other things. There's ways of doing things that are systematic that we don't have.
Yeah.
So it is highly individualized. Because of really weird trade law, like publishers do everything slightly differently or massively differently. And so the bookstores have to adjust all of their things massively differently. Where your volume, how credit works here makes no sense. All of these things make no sense. And so sometimes people perceive things as gatekeeping, like so-and-so has all the answers and they're not telling me. And actually it's like literally they can't because it's illegal because of trade law, or because it literally wouldn't make sense for your size of store or your whatever. And then like, the way people express that is not the system is really effing weird, and we are all actually really struggling right now. And instead it goes like, well, you know,
Mhm.
mainstream kind of like armchair liberal white people speak, basically happens a lot, and they're not realizing that what they're telling the person is not it's really bad that this industry is in crisis across publishing, across book
Yeah.
selling, across all small business. They're saying you just have to figure it out. Like, why can't you just figure it
Yeah.
out? Like that is where the gatekeeping comes in. And it is really frustrating because it's not that it's super great and easy for more mainstream stores, or more established stores are having, in some cases, are having a really hard time because they're having to rethink how they've done something for 30 years.
Yeah.
I see that happening as someone who works like across the industry in these things. But then instead of reaching out in community and solidarity, because that's not the way that they were taught,
Mm-hmm.
it comes across like, let's be in my corner and
And
like
that's like a
lick my
very
wounds.
individualistic, like it's just like deeply, when I say American, I mean the States.
Yeah.
Like to me, that is quintessential capitalism. And so like you saying, it's like, it's an industry problem, like it's affecting all of us, is like, yes, it's all of us. And we're in this together.
Yeah.
But often when you're in the storefront space, when you're a frontline bookseller, like it does not feel like that. It very much
No.
feels like what's right in front of you
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
the entire bubble.
It's the entire bubble, and you'll think like, oh, this is like what there is. And if you're not encouraged to talk to other booksellers in your town, or if there's not other booksellers in your town, or if you don't get a chance to go to a conference because they're expensive to send people to, you know, if your store isn't the kind of store that shares that there's scholarships and grants to go to do these things, either because they're so busy staying alive they don't even know,
Yeah.
which is a thing, or that like they're just like, oh, I'm the owner, I'm the one who gets to go, I'm not going to worry about it. You know, there's so many different types of stores. Look at this hilarious thing that's happening right here. I'm very deeply amused by this. I'd never look at my phone.
The neurodivergent urge to be like, hold on, I know we're deep in conversation, but can you see what's happening?
I know we're deep in conversation, but do you see the piece of hair that's decided to do something entirely different today?
It's something that is very much like Narcissus looking into the pool when it comes to like virtual events. You can't do it on Instagram, but like when you're doing Zoom, you can make yourself disappear, which I appreciate, because otherwise I'm like, how's my hair today? My hair, oh, it's going on my hair. Let me shush.
I'm someone who forgets I like literally have a body most of the time. So like whenever I'm forced to look at myself on screen, I'm like, what's going on?
Is that me? Who is that?
Very funny. But yeah, I think it's a really weird system we live in because you know, I worked at you know, very proud to have worked at Politics and Prose for many years. I learned so much from there. And they did work really hard to make sure that I was getting opportunities, and nor did they stand in the way when I went and found them myself. They were really like, okay, Hannah got a scholarship to a conference. Like, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
But it was also, they were very interested and committed to like the generation of booksellers they were basically creating, because they had a huge swath of people in management that were fairly new to the industry at one time. And then, you know, they knew that they were like the big fish in a relatively small pond that is independent bookselling.
Yeah.
And so not a lot of stores necessarily can like build up and support people and move them on.
Sure.
But there was, you know, it was an incredibly privileged neighborhood. It was an incredibly privileged staff by and large.
Yes.
They were like, you know, even if they were not, you know, individually wealthy, which nobody was, there was a bunch of booksellers, they had certain privileges and societal privilege. And so, you know, even while being aggressively supportive, it was still completely exhausting. And that's just like something that's situational. That has to do with the neighborhood it was in. That has to do with, you know, it being a legacy store. And so a lot of what like I learned to do was to look outside for community. And so, you know, when I was a baby bookseller, book Twitter was like brand new. Is the early 2000s
of like
I don't
the
think
era.
I'd be a bookseller without Twitter, man. It's weird.
Just as we were getting online, and I was just thinking of like, because I really appreciate live as an opportunity for like virtual programming and like, right, like we are not both in New York
No.
right now, right? Like that is a cool thing that
Yeah.
especially still like COVID is still very much a thing.
Yeah,
And
I
as a
took my
lot of
mask off for this video and I'm very distanced from anyone else in the store because we still wear them in the store.
right. And so like Twitter to me, especially disability Twitter, was one of those
Mm,
early spaces pre-COVID that understood how to engage actual conversation. And I really miss this like era of Twitter where I would tune in. I wish I remembered like the hashtag that circulated. I think the user took themselves offline eventually.
hmm.
So I can't credit them, but they led basically like a weekly talk. So you would tune in, but they would just like send their tweet and it was like question one, the like introductory question to the topic that week. And then everyone would come in with their answer, but you could interact with each other live. So like it would usually be like, okay, how are you preparing to take care of yourself during this conversation? So like
Ooh,
today, I'm like, I gave myself time to make my coffee and be with the pop. And so like, how am I arriving to this conversation today? How am I
yeah,
self-soothing? And you
yeah.
get to see everyone. And then the person leading the conversation would do question two and question, and it would be like a series of like 7 questions over the course of an
Mm,
hour. And that person would be really, really active in like retweeting everyone's response. You got to see what people were
wow.
saying. And that's like when you say like book Twitter, I'm like, yeah, like honestly, the distribution of knowledge through the internet has been
Yeah,
an incredible part of organizing.
yeah,
And,
yeah,
and I think this like our generation as millennials and like as Gen Z's coming up, we're just seeing that more and more, and it's like really remarkable how movements have accelerated because of being able to connect
yeah.
in inventive ways.
Yeah, I think yeah, there's no way I'd be a bookseller without like other knowing that other people were doing similar or interesting work, and there were booksellers of color because there were there's only a couple people who worked at the store despite there being almost 100 employees
That's wild.
that were people of color, and and they were they were from like I'd say a boomer and a elder Gen X, and that they had like a very like less intersectional like view than I did about helping each other out,
Hmm.
and so that would cause tension too. And I was like, we all like, at the end of the day, we had each other's backs, but it was definitely there was internal tension. Um, and I do think that it's a very it can be extremely isolating, and even with that, I still eventually was like, I have to start my own store.
Okay. So this is what I was waiting for is like where did the aha moment come for you? Because it can be very easy being in a legacy store where you feel like you have this structure underneath you. There is a little bit more room to grow opposed to like a burgeoning store because you can see the
Mm-hmm.
system. So you can see what those next steps are. But eventually, like with like small businesses, like there's only so high you can climb,
Yeah,
and like once you like get to management, unless you're gonna take over that store, like you're gonna be the owner.
yeah.
So like when you were working at Politics and Prose, were you like, it's time, I got to do my own thing?
I had
And
a
I
white lady
understand that might
manager.
not be like a one and done like
No, no,
moment.
I knew that I would either be there for the rest of my life or I would be owning my own store. And it
Yeah,
was kind of just like dependent on what else was happening at the
yeah.
store. The ultimate like I gotta go was I had a very privileged white lady manager who was causing a lot of problems for my life, and I was like, I am the things are very unhealthy here. I gotta go.
Yeah.
But that was like after other things. So I've been building out the store idea in my head for loyalty for a long time. I took a lot of business classes. I one of my minors in undergrad was a social entrepreneurship minor, which is a very cool thing. My weird little undergrad offered, and I definitely was just like my mother had owned her own small business. I was
Okay.
very much so of a mind that was a possibility. Obviously, in the Black community, being a sole proprietor or
Yeah.
being a small business owner or having a major side hustle is like pretty normal, pretty normalized. One of the
Okay.
reasons I liked book selling is I was an academic before, and it was like really looked down upon to be doing things in multiple universes. You were just supposed to be only existing within academia,
Hmm.
and I was like, I think the fact that
That's
I have to work
like its own
retail.
conversation.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing. It's like the fact that I have to work retail because you actually don't pay me enough to be a full-time student makes me a better teacher because I understand where my students are coming from. But that's
Yeah.
again a whole other conversation for another day. But I liked being able to bring my whole self to
Yeah.
retail. And as that became, it became more and more evident that I wanted to not just work on changing the store, but work on changing the industry at large. To do that, you kind of have to, your voice has to be pretty
Yeah.
big. And um, one of the kind of the two biggest ways to do that that publishers respond to, the community might respond to several other people. The people they see on the floor every day on their bookstore are actually the people they're more connected to. They're much more connected to the frontline bookseller than the store owner. Yeah, like the people who come into Petworth every day, because my schedule is I just fill in holes wherever. So sometimes I'm always at one store and sometimes I'm at the other, and sometimes I'm like today I'm split. So you might not catch me, but you're going to catch like the recurring regular floor bookseller. Yeah. You're going to build a relationship with the frontline bookseller in a way that like far surpasses what I can do. Like they're the most important
Absolutely
person. So the community sees that person, and then maybe like who's booking the events and what kind of authors you're bringing to town and that kind of stuff also has like a deep impact. But as far as like structurally messing with publishing and structurally messing with, you know, advocating for better trade law and things like that, store owners and head buyers, the latter of which is an increasingly rare position at a store because very few stores can support someone literally sitting all day looking at catalogs and meeting with sales reps and reviewing numbers, even though that's structurally one of the best ways to grow your business. It's very, very hard to find the money to pay somebody to do that if you're not already an institutional store. So very few stores have that job. Politics and Prose has a few people in that position. Like there's always a head buyer for adults and a head buyer for children. And then who else is working on buying is structurally changes. But, you know, the person who was doing that at the time, you know, it had no plans to retire and was going to be there for a while. And he did a lot to, you know, train me on and other folks on buying as the store expanded and they had kind of like the satellite store buyers. I got to do some of that. I learned a lot, but I knew that there was not going to be like a full-time buying position for me open anytime soon. And the store had actually just been sold. So a few years ago to Bradley Graham and Lisa Muscatine. And, you know, I was like, I don't know what they're going to do next, but they're not selling it next week. And I definitely can't afford Politics and Prose when they do.
That'd be nice.
Huge store. And again, and it wasn't really my community. It's like, you know, a very, 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 it's like the perfect community for that store. That store and that community grew up together, right? And that is important, but it was not mine. So, you know, I was like, I just don't really see a future for me here. And they also kind of didn't know what to do with me, not because, again, they weren't supporting me, but they were like, you're just like a weird jack of all trades and we can put you anywhere, which is true. But that you're not growing and you're not, you know, satisfied either. So it was like, we just kind of looked at each other and we were like, it's you know, it was really, really hard at the time, but it was also like kind of hilariously a conscious uncoupling where I was like, I actually don't have like any bitterness about it or about like the time there. I learned so much. And part of that is being like, I know the industry language speak. I have access to a little bit of that privilege. It's not going to protect me, but I do know what it is. I know the master's tools, as the saying goes. And it is definitely, you know, it's useful to know those things and to have those connections and to have had the support and time to learn and grow in this industry and to learn from some of the best in the industry. You know, a buyer who'd been doing it for 30 years and who was like, it knew the history of the colophants, which is the logos on the side of the books, right? Like this person knew everything. And I was like, that's a big deal. That's a big deal to get to learn that and not have to figure that out on the fly. To open the store and then learn that stuff. I got to learn that stuff and then open my store.
Yeah, that's exactly like you started off by saying, is like there really can be no manual, that sort of institutional knowledge that like with that person there goes that knowledge unless it is handed down. And so much of it like is by building those relationships. And I think if you're I think because we're theater people too, we have a theater background. It
Yeah.
very much comes with the territory of being like, let me get in there.
Oh yeah.
But
I'm
like,
gonna
you
bother
gotta like
you.
be unafraid to ask those questions and be like, yeah, I don't know this thing. To be willing to admit you don't know a thing, to then want to get to know a
Well,
thing,
it's a
and hopefully you do have
combination.
peers
Access.
that
Yeah.
want to share with
you
you.
you have to be. I realized rather late that it was like a personality thing, that I was just gonna be like, no, you have to tell me that, you have to tell me that. And not everybody has that. I forget
Yeah,
that as somebody who trains other people. I'm like, why aren't they asking me questions? I was like, oh, it's just personality. Like, not
yeah.
everybody's as nosy as I am. I'm like, literally, like, would go to the finance director and be like, how do we measure like square footage in the
Answers,
store? How do
answers.
turns work? Like, you have to tell me. And he
Yeah,
would delighted to tell me, but it never occurred to him to walk up to me and tell me that.
absolutely.
And so some of that is like structurally changing how training works in this industry. NABA started a book selling
Mm-hmm.
school so that people can go learn this stuff from somebody. It is it some of it is just like access to someone who's willing to sit down and tell you this stuff. And again, it's going to work different at every store, but there are
Mm-hmm.
some fundamental
Yeah.
things that like you should just be able to learn without, you know, needing necessarily to spend 10 years at a different store before
Yeah.
you open your own. Yeah.
So now that you've hit 5+ years,
Mm-hmm.
right? You've reached a milestone. You're still here.
Thank
Congratulations.
you.
And you went from pop-up, like you said, and it being your thing to now you have a co-owner. And
Mm-hmm.
I know you've recently started expanding, like you have an operations manager,
Mm-hmm.
and you had your big fundraiser in the fall in which
Yeah.
you announced your future goals,
Yeah.
which is great because you're saying to folks not just like, hey, help us right now, but you're saying, hey, help invest in our
Yeah.
future, which is your future too,
Yeah.
which I really respect because the future of book selling really, really is bringing others in, I think. And that's not just frontline booksellers, but I'm very curious after hearing you talk about like the way you came into book selling and now you get to share that with your staff, whether they're people who are new to the trade, or they come with some background.
Yeah.
And I was thinking specifically of the post you shared yesterday, or the day before rather, about Juneteenth.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and that to me, I was like, that's very loyalty, but that's not necessarily indicative of the trade.
Yeah.
And so that's a choice that you made for your store. So I also wonder what it's like for you where it's Pride Month and yesterday you have Juneteenth and it's Pride Month and you're having to make a choice, you and
Mm-hmm.
Christine, as co-owner, of like yourselves and your staff, when that's like very much not a thing in retail, in book selling,
Yes.
in
Yeah.
America.
Yeah.
And what
Yeah.
that's been like for you as you've like grown out your business from like I am one person
Mm-hmm.
and only need to think like here to becoming more like lateral, I guess.
Yeah. I would say there was a version of Hannah that was very, very good at it, and then I lost it, partially due to burnout, partially due to dealing with depression induced by burnout, um, having long COVID. I was working 17 to 20 hours a day during the height of the pandemic just to keep the store going,
I
to try to
believe it.
get government grants, to try to figure out all of this stuff, and to deal with like the sudden interest in the store. We went from my estimation of where we would be year 10 and year 2 because of people's interest in Black Lives Matter, people's interest in anti-racist literature. And then it all disappeared 2 years later. I mean, disappeared, ducked overnight. And then all those publisher bills came due so we had to increase store level, we had to increase everything. And I didn't even realize it until months after it happened. And I had to come to my staff and be like, I'm depressed. I'm not managing the store well. I'm having a really hard time. And it took me so long to realize that's what was happening that I'm still cleaning up the mess from that.
Yeah.
And it's really hard and crappy to be like, I didn't, like, I had all these plans and it didn't work out.
Yeah.
We're still here. We're still going to be here.
Yeah.
But like, I need your help, and I'm very sorry that I haven't been a good leader. And I'm still figuring that out, and I'm still cleaning it up, and I'm still repairing relationships with some of the staff members. And, sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes you have to just be like, let me help you find a better place to be for a while. Because I don't want to lose you from the industry. And other people
Yeah.
are like, I'm still in it. Like, let's keep working together. And it sucks, but it's so much better. I worked at so many stores where like festering crap from years of unspoken
Yeah.
pain
Yeah.
or frustration or exhaustion has like messed things up. And I mean, talking like, you know, you're like, I'm sorry, this fight was in 1984 and you're still here. Like,
Yeah.
first of all, again, why are you doing this? Go somewhere
Yeah.
else. First of all, and second of all, we needed to have this conversation 10 years ago, and I just really didn't want that to happen. And it's not perfect, and there's I just like want to really always on main, like I always just want to be like, people think I have the answers and I don't, but I'm like very willing to talk through what I've done right and what I've done wrong. And you can ask everyone else also those same questions. And yeah, and so that's partly why Christine came on, because she believed in the mission of loyalty so much and she wanted to help us get through this.
Yeah.
And then we were able, with that fundraiser, to bring on an operations manager who is a really wonderful was already part of our community, had worked at another DC bookstore that's kind of like our sister bookstore, Lost City Books. They're already a community organizer. They're an incredible queer musician and artist and writer. And they're also, like me, highly ADHD and therefore highly obsessively organized, because if you don't, your whole world will fall apart. And I was like, well, I can show you what I have been trying to get done for the last 2 years to repair from the COVID crash. I can show that to you, and I know your brain can take it and complete it, which is exactly what's happening. We just finished our handbook. We just finished passing the schedule over to this person. So I'm now able to go and start looking at, okay, here's this fundraising we did. Here's what we do for the next 5 years to ensure another 10 years, another 20 years.
I want to take a moment because to just acknowledge that, because 5 is like a milestone of like we're still here.
Yeah, 5 is just like, you're just like, oh, I'm still alive, I guess.
You're still here. But what you just said is something that like stores at year 15 haven't gotten to yet. Like, and it's not because they don't want to, it's because there's so much about the staying alive in the moment amidst trade laws and Amazon and competition like that, and then COVID amongst that. That was really a make or break time. But like the not just you're still here, but the fact that you're transitioning into like a new phase of loyalty is really remarkable, because there are stores that, like, bless them for still being here, but they don't have those things in place for themselves. So that's really good work, and I hope you can like take a moment and see that and be like, okay, we did that part, and that's a good thing.
So. Yeah, check back. Let's put a pin in the calendar and do next year, and you can be like, did you do it? I respond very well to deadlines. Kay, as you know.
Like, okay, Hannah, it's summer solstice again.
New Year. Happy summer solstice, by the way.
Yes. So we had Juneteenth, we have summer solstice, tomorrow's a full moon. I know DC Pride celebrates early, so does Brooklyn Pride, but then Manhattan Pride's next week.
Silver Springs Pride is the end of the month. It's on the 30th.
Okay.
So we have one last Pride. We have our drag story hour this Sunday. Yep. It's we're really feeling ourselves, and Christine Filipino was like, and it's Asian American.
Yes, it's Asian Pride Month.
We're really glowing up here. Sorry, Malik. And our I think the other thing is we're speaking of neurodivergence, we're listening to Janet Jackson today, and I'm just having a hard time not just dancing the whole time.
I mean, it's a vibe.
Malik always puts on the best music. I do think, though, like, back to your points, which I totally lost somewhere in there, about like choosing when to be closed and when to be open, and that kind of thing. And I think I said earlier, like, the ethos of being like a bookstore that is queer led and led by people of color. Specifically, I still view it as rooted in like Black revolutionary tactics. Is that you're closed sometimes when you could be making money. And it's really, really hard, because like everyday sales like are so important to us. Like, we're still very much so dependent on cash flow right now. You know, and it was really funny because it was literally in like my business plan that we'd be closed on Juneteenth, and like nobody knew what Juneteenth was when I wrote my business plan. And by
So
nobody,
we're
I
like
mean like
business
the white
consultants
people.
looking at that and being
Yeah,
like, that's an interesting
yeah,
choice.
yeah. And I think like last year or the year before it was on a Monday, which we're closed on Mondays. We just do some admin that day anyway.
Yeah.
Our street's very, almost all the businesses on the street are closed on Monday, so it's not remotely unusual for us. Again, it's like that's the difference between being on like a side street in a neighborhood versus being in a downtown or something like that. Like that changes the dynamics. And that's part of why we are here, because it's a community space as opposed to being a tourist spot, which there's nothing wrong with being that.
But that's
awesome.
its own thing.
But that's a different thing, right? So, you know, I think it is interesting. Part of doing this is also training your customer base, and a lot of that has to do with being transparent and conversational with them. That we are people, and we are especially important to remind people in the age of AI and automated everything and overnight shipping that has no cost, but it obviously has a huge cost. So, you know, a literal cost, you paid a membership fee for that, but also a huge cost environmentally and socially, and to traffic in your neighborhood, and to the least among us who are working jobs at weird hours and peeing in bottles in order to get you a thing the next day that you then leave in the porch or the vestibule for 3 weeks without opening, right? Like, did you really need it tomorrow? And so some of it is setting boundaries and expectations within your community that like we're people, and like it's gonna, you know, your order is gonna be processed within a day, and then it's going to arrive when it's going to arrive, and you know, just in all of our language and all of our communication, reminding people that we are people.
We are people. We are people.
We are people. We are people. We are people. And you know, and there are times, like I said, you know, being the only like person of color, specifically a Black face, working in a very privileged neighborhood, people would like find reasons to be mad at me, whether or not I was in charge of something. And of course they didn't, you know, quote unquote, realize what they were doing. But like that was like a daily part of my life in customer service, in book selling and in general retail. And so just being like, no, I just like want my staff to feel empowered to be like, no, we will not be engaging in this. And then also to like, you know, again, I have messed up a lot, and so for them to tell me this is bad, things are bad, they need to be able to talk to me like that too. And so I don't know, I think you can look at it in a variety of ways. There's stores that do really cool celebratory cross connection, like community fun stuff on Juneteenth, which is lovely. I went to some of it, you know, but I want to not work that day, and I don't think I should have to. And I think a lot of that comes from like working retail for most of my life, and everyone else's holiday is not your holiday. You do not get it off, and specifically in a day where more and more white people are getting off days that are for Black holidays, and then the Black people are not getting those days off, and you're like, what? I was like, well, this is the one area I have control over. So like, you know, as long as that's still what we as a store want to do, that's what we're going to do. For all those opportunities, we're closed between Christmas Day and New Year's Day every year. That was also in the business plan.
Bless.
It's on a purely practical level. It's far less hard to juggle people's holiday vacations that way.
I mean,
like,
that is
it's
valid.
Just like, it's totally valid. Also, the store doesn't really do a lot of business that time of year. Like, there's people who come in and browse, and there is benefit to that, by the way. Not every interaction has to result in a sale.
Sure.
But literally, like, paying to keep the lights on is, you know, not necessarily important that day. Having that time to be closed, and then we have a sale on our website, and then we come back with like an in-store New Year's Day sale, which helps recoup some of the financial loss because people are motivated to shop. We trained our customer base to know that. And that has been really rewarding and fulfilling, and like letting people know, like, you have this time. This is a paid holiday you're going to have every year. We will be resting. We will be done. This is the hardest time of year. we're going to chill, we're going to recoup, and then we're going to start the new year off with a bang, and we're going to have a great time. And again, just like every little piece of that built into how I structurally look at the store. And then now that Christine's on board too, you know, asking her as someone who was an employee of the bookstore and now is a co-owner, and then also what holidays matter to her, what timelines matter, you know, how things can happen. I'm a tall person, and I'm by and large, aside from some recurring injuries that are getting worse as I get older, but I'm relatively physically able. And so like her being like, you need more chairs in the store, which is totally anathema to me. We need the aisles to be wider. We, you know, right. You know, it changes things, and those changes will keep happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love that for you. And I think these are important, things, like when you keep reiterating training your customers, you're also training your peers.
Yeah.
And people who may not be in the industry yet, but are looking to you to be like, I want to do that someday. And I think it's really useful that you're vocal about it, not just like sign on the door, like, hey, we're closed today. It's like, here's why. And it's important to us because it, like everything in the store, it's intentional. Yeah. And it's something that with the bike, because it's not retail, so we're not paying the bills.
Right.
I'm often encouraging other volunteers, and they're encouraging me as we support each other. Like, we are not beholden to anything unless we've made a partner commitment or something, that like we can choose to take care of ourselves. Like, we can decide like, yo, we've been going really hard. Or like I recently, like you were saying, like acknowledging like I get seasonal depression in the summer. What's up?
Listen, it's gross.
Just to keep things
it's
fun.
a gross time of year. I was not seasonally depressed in the summer until I lived in New York.
Oh, God.
It made me real depressed.
Yo, I mean, there's a meme that's like, spring, what kind of depressed? Like, you're like horny depressed, and summer, you're like a different kind of depressed. And then there's like 3 weeks in autumn where you're like, everything is beautiful, and then it's like winter, like isolation depressed, and it's like accurate. But it's something that I think about a lot, as someone who like started with an idea on my own. And so like, I love that you have Christine, and Christine's also very vocal about being chronically ill and working through like how to be a business owner and a leader while being disabled. And it's something that I try to also be like, everybody knows me, like it's very open book, but like I still try to reiterate like the spoon theory concept of like, you can't do it alone. You can't. That's not sustainable.
And also the other factor of that is like, you can't do it alone, and you can't be all things all the time, and you're gonna mess up, and you have to be honest. But I think another part of that I like, you know, you were just saying like, talk about what's happening. Like, you're always reintroducing yourself and your bookstore to people. People are always finding you. People they think you know you, but they just shop sometime during the holidays, whatever. All that to say, I
spend my dollars here, and you're like, I've never seen you before.
I've literally never seen you before. Okay. Yeah, always. There's always somebody who's like, as a loyal customer, and I'm like, man, you bought one thing in 2020. But it's definitely like, oh, you have to reintroduce yourself. And that's a good thing, because it actually forces you to remember yourself why you're doing this and what you believe, and being like, if I'm going to say this, I better actually stand on business. Like, okay. Because it's really, really hard. And I cannot imagine doing this unless I was motivated by something like larger. Because nothing about book selling is super easy. Nothing about retail is easy. Nothing about small business is easy. But the cool part is getting to have booksellers who maybe didn't feel welcome in the industry otherwise leave my store and then work at other bookstores and take on leadership roles in those bookstores and influence how those bookstores work. To have somebody go, I want to stay here and I'm committed to staying here and figuring out how to grow the store with you is an incredible act of faith. To have a community person come in and go like, I just want to figure out how to work with you all. I don't know if it's a bulk buy or volunteering or just sharing it on social media, whatever. Like, let me know how I can help your bookstore. All of that stuff is so huge. And a lot of times in the moment, you don't even have like the ability to express it because you're just like, again, you're getting through the day, or you're like you're not in the spot. I'm often not in the spot to receive feelings.
You're like, that will come later.
That's for later times, but it does all mean the world. And so I think being loud and being vocal is, yes, good for other people and good for your business, but it's good for you to remember why on earth you're doing what you're doing anyway. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Well, we've been like deep in it. As I was like, we're gonna have a cute little fireside chat, which is so funny because I was thinking about the fact that this is actually the first non-binary tandem talk between two book homies, opposed to it's been a non-binary and an author every time. So I want to acknowledge a non-binarian, Carl, came up with this idea because he literally was like, so could I just like talk to Alejandro Varela because he's my author crush? And I was like, yes. Like that is where the idea came from. And so like structurally it was just like, yeah, we get to have conversations that like I get to pick your brain and hear like the things that you wouldn't be sharing in an author event. And I know that you like moderate events with authors in your store. I work in events too. Like a lot of like being in the industry is being in conversation with one another, but in a specific kind of venue, in a specific kind of conversation. But I love that we just got in the weeds. But it's the sort of thing that like, I feel like these conversations happen at conferences after you have like one-on-one moments after a session because you're unpacking some stuff. Oh, we got a question in the chat. What is the non-binary if not a vehicle to chat with cool people? That is true. 100%. 100%. Yeah, but just now the last thing you said reminded me of like, oh, that's a cute little question. I remember Carl asking Alejandro in that first conversation was you were saying like, it's such a hard job that you're not running a bookstore because you're not like, you have to be 100% in it because it is hard. But you were referencing being an academic, you were referencing being in theater and like your family having business ownership. So like you come from a lot of backgrounds, you wear lots of hats, but like if you could have another career and we're talking, it does not even need to be like, I actually have that transferable skills. But if you were like, you know, in like another life, I would love to be X thing. Like if you were not Hannah of Loyalty Bookstores.
I think hilariously enough, it wouldn't be that different because I've also, my other fantasy is to like own a theater, which like isn't that it's more difficult. Like I can't, even my fantasies are just like, the other fantasy is like owning like a bunch of land in Scotland and having people like come live on it.
Scotland
like
specifically.
I was like, yeah, or like, wait, you know, just I need like a lot of wind and a crumbling infrastructure. Is that not everybody's fantasy?
I don't know what the image is. I was like, yeah, land, and then I was like, wind. It's interesting.
Rain. It's gonna the weather. I like when the weather changes every 15 to 20 minutes. So I'm really drawn to Celtic lands, Ireland, Scotland, Wales. No, but I do think like I've never imagined an existence that was not like communal and creative in some way, shape, or form. And like everything you just said about like my background is like pretty obviously why. But I do think, you know, I think it's I need something that involves brain tingles, and I need something that involves community, but also space, so I can run away and stare at a wall or the sky occasionally. So Yeah, my definitely my fantasy was like, I was like, I'm going to build furniture and build sets, and then people will come play on them. That was my fantasy as a child. I was going to write a bunch of plays and a bunch of books and own a theater, and people were going to come like to the theater. I guess I thought there were still like roving theater groups, which there kind of are, but like, you know, very, I was just like, everyone's just going to show up and put on a play on the set I've designed.
Yeah,
And they'll just know what to do. It's
yeah.
fine.
The troops will just come on through, all the street performers.
Very normal, very Robin Hood
Uh-huh.
vibes.
That's very similar to a vision I've held for a long time, like also from a theater background, and not necessarily looking at it as a bookstore, although like books really are the core of it. But it's because of, we keep talking about retail, and yet I always forget, despite the fact that literally like you're at a POS, you're selling and making dollars. That's like the name of the game. That is literally the business. Is like, I forget that it's retail, and I've worked in other like retail and customer facing settings, and it holds a different space for me because the exchange, like when you have the time and the brain space, and like the other person on the other side of that conversation, your customer, when they ask for a book, and you get to kind of engage in something a little bit more human than just a transaction, is very deep, very different than like the day-to-day of most other retail settings that like I forget it's retail. But like when I picture a community space, I do picture a stage. Like I do picture there being, you know, I guess roving people coming up. I'm like, and then performers and writers who want to, and I'm like, well, who are these people that are just like, I'd like to read my work, please.
And as someone who's on record that I hate open mic nights, it's really funny that like, because I've obviously like, I've managed coffee shops, I've managed bookstores, like I have suffered, I've paid my dues. I will never supervise another open mic night as all forms of deities are my witness. I was like, people were like, do you want to do one? And I was like, I will give you the space and I will leave, because like it's too anxiety inducing for me. But on the other hand, I'm like, I basically want an open mic night building. Like it's
literally
our internal selves.
I mean, I think this is also something that it's very like, come on kids, let's put on a show in the barn. Is like, I want to bring people together to do the thing that they most want to do, but they need more than themselves to accomplish. And I think book selling can be that. Theater absolutely is that, like the ensemble nature of it, and like everyone that's behind the scenes is what makes it happen.
I'm just delighted by the concept of book selling as an ensemble. That makes me so happy.
Well, you were
I love it.
talking about like the buyer as like a pivotal role. Like I think a lot of folks who come to a bookstore and they're like, they get to live, who aren't in the industry, they get to live in the like wonder and the magic of like, aren't books amazing, which we love. And then when you're thinking of like the humans who take care of your web orders, and they're not just like magical little pixies shipping out your books, it's like there are those humans and those crucial roles. Like without a receiver, you would not have a bookstore. The Muppet Show as business model. There's literally a running bit. There's a non-binarian who's tuning in right now, but like often if you visited the bike, there's a running bit that the non-binarian is actually 3 raccoons in a trench coat, because we all get mistaken for each other now of like the non-binarian is this like monolith, like it's not one person. And we literally get mistaken for each other, and I'm like, yo, I don't know if you know this, but I'm white, and that is an Asian person who looks nothing like me. Like we do not present the same, like truly bonkers. But like, yes, we are all one person coming together to produce a thing. I feel like that's what drew me to you, as like seeing what you were building at Loyalty. So thank you for chatting with me.
I told you, feelings are for later.
Feelings are for when you get off of live and then you save it and you're like, oh my god, I was a person that I allowed people to perceive. Literally the first like minute or 2 minutes as I'm like vamping and starting the live before you joined, I was just like, I think I'm gonna, it's gonna be so cute, because I was just like excited to be like ready to talk to you that I'm like embarrassed thinking of like, oh God, that's going to be archived for the public to witness.
I have like a rule where I'll just like tell Christine, this is like part of being in business with me, where I'm like, I can't be perceived today. And it doesn't mean that I'm not going to be in public. I'm going to probably be in public the whole day, but I'm like, I don't want to actually have like any deep conversations today. And Christine as a Libra is like always ready for a deep conversation.
Yes,
like,
Libra.
I'm like, I'm full Virgo today. I am a machine. Do not
Full
perceive
Virgo.
me. Do not look me in the eyes.
Libras need a Virgo.
Same, vice versa. Everybody needs it. I was like, all of my, but by and large, my closest friends are Earth signs and Scorpio. So we're always ready to burn something down or build a building, like whatever we need done.
Incredible. Or build a building. Is that what you just said?
Burn it down or build it. One of the two. There's
really
sure. Nothing in between.
With lots
nothing
of wind.
In between.
Lots of wind. Ideally.
Ideally, lots of wind. I would best describe both of my favorite people in the industry, yourself included, as well as like in my personal life. I was like, I collect operations managers as like people, and
oh my God,
that, like like stage managers, right? Like
yes.
a bunch of stage managers, which yes. also can best be described as a bunch of raccoons in a trench coat, like
yes,
stage managers.
Absolutely. Like if there's any piece of advice I'd give to anyone who is like, how do I start a thing? Whether that is like I want to start a book club, if it's like, I want to start my roving theater troupe now that I'm so inspired by this weird ass conversation. If it's, I want to start my bookstore and where do I start? Like, if you can channel the stage manager brain, or if you know someone who like lives in that space, another non-binarian who does a lot of work behind the scenes and is very much a like, do not perceive me, actually just went to Children's Institute and then came back and was like, please never make me be in front of people again. And it's because she lives in like spreadsheet land and is like, let's get shit down on paper. Like, let's record things and like organize things.
Wonderful.
So like you need those pieces of the puzzle to put brain talker stuff together.
Yeah, it is different. It is definitely different. I guess like as we're closing out, I would just, I don't know, encourage people to dig in and get weird and specific with it, because the way that you do things could literally be the missing piece your community or your industry or your whatever needs. Because like I said, I don't think there's actually a lot of intentional gatekeeping, but there's gatekeeping nonetheless, and it can be really harmful. But I think also sometimes we gatekeep ourselves and we don't realize that's what we have to offer.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of names for that, but I think in general, just like you have more to offer than you think you do.
Yeah.
Everybody does.
Yeah. And I very much I know this is true for you at Loyalty, that you have like your literary patron saints. But to me, it's very Octavia Butler of the like, if you don't see the thing, like you have to make the thing. In terms of future building.
And absolutely.
And often like looking to what the people who you do admire, looking to what they're doing and saying like, they're doing their thing and maybe I can too.
100%.
So for folks who are tuning in now, for folks who'll be tuning in later, give Loyalty Books a follow. And don't just support Black and Asian owned businesses during Black History Month and AAPI and then like Juneteenth, here's one day of sales. If you heard anything from this conversation and what the sudden interest of anti-racism in 2020 did after the fact, it's like actually the most sustainable way to whether it's pay reparations, it's being an ally, it's just being a member of a community, is to show ongoing support. And maybe that means you buy, I don't know, a sticker every once in a while, and maybe just don't buy a book at Christmas and say, I spent all my, I am a loyal customer. Show up for your local bookstore. If you want your bookstore to stick around, show up for your local bookstore. And for anyone who is in the DMV area this weekend, You have Drag Story Hour going on.
Mhm.
And I know there's information circulating online for supporting that in the Rainbow Coalition going on.
Yep.
So check out Loyalty's Instagram of how you can show
Yay.
up this weekend.
Yes, absolutely. If you're in the DMV area, come out. If you've got some kiddos, bring them to Drag Story Hour. Charlemagne Chateau is our fabulous drag queen at the Silver Spring location. They are so dope. It is such a good time. We'll do a little hokey pokey and we'll read some children's books. If you're interested in volunteering with the Rainbow Coalition, they're a Rainbow Coalition DMV, I think, on Instagram. They're wonderful. They help protect story times all over the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. So they're really wonderful, and we are so grateful for them.
Yeah. Cool.
All
right.
It was good to see you, bud.
It was really good to see you. I hope you're able to continue to carve out space for rest and for your brain and recharge, as well as enjoy your pride.
Yeah. We're getting there. We're getting
there. Like once you get over the other side of like the Silver Spring Pride, you said is the last one.
Yeah, it's the last one.
Yeah, you're like home stretch. You're gonna make it there.
Happening.
Literally, how it feels. This is our first Pride with the bike. So we've been like going hard, and I'm like, yeah, I'm like actually kind of looking forward to July where we get to chill out a bit. So that's been interesting.
Yeah. My pride is July 1st, taking a nap.
my pride plan's taking a nap.
Taking a nap.
Yeah, cool. On that note, thanks everyone for tuning in. Thank you so much, Hannah, for taking time to chat with me. We've been so booked and busy. Thank you, Loyalty. Thank you to your booksellers who allowed us to chat on the floor today.
Literally. Yeah, who works the front of the store so I could be doing this really beautiful thing that made me feel warm and fuzzy. Thank you.
Yeah. For sure. All right.
Bye.
Peace, y'all.